Welcome to the denture module for the workflows on 3D printing. So at this point, we're going to talk about our 4-step workflow once again. Capture, design, print, and process. Now with dentures, we do have a pretty significant design step if we're wanting to get into it where we design it ourselves. However, just like other things, we can design it using a third-party group. When capturing for dentures, it's very similar to what you want to capture if you're doing this in a more traditional analog model. We need an upper impression, a lower impression, and a bite at the end of the day. The kicker is just like when we do traditional impressions that we want to get our natural landmarks, posterior palatal seal, retromolar pad, those regions so that we can get an adequate fit of a denture. What I'm doing in my practice is using these primarily for immediate dentures that I know I'm going to reline, or dentures that I'm going to convert from like an all-on-4 or a fixed prosthetic. That way I'm less concerned about nailing down these landmarks and getting that with a digital impression via soft tissue. So let's go ahead and take a look at kind of what we do from a design standpoint and what our options are. So Dentca is the company that I've been using for the most part to really kind of dial in these different workflows. I started off with designing my own, which is probably, again, what I kind of tell people not to do. I really encourage you to start with doing the design, having them send you the design. But Dentca also provides the resin, so they kind of have the denture workflow down pat. So when you come to their homepage, up at the top, you'll notice that there's an order tab. Under the order tab, we go all the way down, we see Design Service by Dentca. When we click on that, here we see their denture design service is $30 to $60. So again, the beauty of this is you can get a single denture for $30 or upper and lower denture design for $60. When you select order, it's going to walk you through the entire process. Enter in the patient's name, gender, shades, lip length, the design of the teeth, whether you want a try-in or a final design, and then you're going to upload your impressions. Upper impression, lower impression, bite. At this point, they're going to do the design in their CAD/CAM software, and then they're going to send you back a number of different files to make your 3D printed dentures. We'll go through that specifically when we look at the print phase of doing these dentures. So the next option is to do the design software yourself. Now everything with Dentca is cloud-based, so it's all on the internet. You can do this from any computer, anywhere you're at. When you do that, you go into Dentca Design. We're going to browse projects because I have a number of projects that I've done. And when we look at these projects, we can go to a completed project. This is what's going to show you what you're kind of creating prior to exporting this as an STL. Here you can see I've designed an upper and lower denture. This patient had a diastasis they wanted to keep. And so now I can export these files to 3D print in my office. Your other option, or not other option, excuse me, but you can, to show you kind of briefly what you can do, let's go up to this one. Well, here we are. This is in the middle of the steps, so we haven't actually completed the denture yet, just because I wanted to show you kind of what we can do from moving the teeth standpoint. This is a plane that allows us to open and close the bite. We can do a number of different steps by virtually extracting teeth, pointing our landmarks, and at the end of the day, telling us where we want the borders of the denture to be. So this software can be very intuitive. It has a guided tour for everything you do and every step of the process. So if it's something you want to do, you're welcome to do this. I believe they charge $25 for the export of your file if you design versus $30 if they design it for you. So again, you can see why I'm having them design most of my designs for us. At this point, let's go on over to the print phase where we look at the files that we're getting from these dentures. The print step for printing these 3D dentures. Okay, so once we've gotten our files exported, whether that was Dentca designing them for us, using another software to have them designed for you, or designing them yourselves in their design software, we're going to get a series of different STLs. Now with these 3D printed dentures, there's a number of different ways to do it. The main way that we like to do it in our office is print the denture base and denture teeth in separate resins and then stick them together. So for instance, your denture teeth is going to come as an STL file. We're going to print that in a denture teeth resin, like an A1, A2, etc. And then the denture base is going to come in another STL file, and then that's going to be printed in a denture base resin, pink, light pink, original pink, etc. Your other option is to print this as one piece, a solid piece, teeth and base, and then print that in a denture teeth resin, and then paint on the soft tissue color with a number of different resins or staining materials. We'll talk more about that in the post-processing of the denture section, but for now, I'm going to show you what it looks like to import both sets of files into Rayware to send to your printer. So just like everything, the first thing we're going to do is go up to our settings. We're going to stick with Pro 95, but this time we're going to go over to Dentca. I've found that their denture resin is really the best one to use. And we have two different layers here, smooth and recommended. For the teeth, we're going to stick with smooth, and we're going to pick shade A2. We're going to apply, and now we're going to go and add our files. So we click the add button, we go browse for the files, and you're going to see that there's a number of different files here to print. So when Dentca sends you the files specifically, they're going to give you a lot of options. They're going to give you the upper denture base, the lower denture base, the lower teeth all included as one big set, the lower teeth as an anterior portion, lower teeth as a left posterior portion, and lower teeth as a right posterior portion. So let me go ahead and show you just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. The lower denture base is going to be if you're wanting to print this in two different resins. So here you see we have a denture base with no teeth attached. So if I was going to do this in two separate resins, I'm going to add both bases on here. So let's go ahead and add the upper denture base. So now I've got both my denture bases on the platform. Now the first thing you notice, which is also very different than what we've seen before, is now we're getting a high chance of print failure. So there's a little more work to be done here versus when we would typically do it utilizing a surgical guide or a model. Now the two different ways you can do this are by adding supports or the introduction of a raft. So we're going to do one of each for this section. For the lower denture, we're going to add supports. Now, if I put the supports on the teeth, we're going to have a hard time getting these to potentially seat. But if I put them on the bottom, it could mess with the ability for this to seat on the ridge. Now, like I said, most of the time I'm doing these for immediate dentures in my practice. So I find that putting the supports on the intaglio side of the denture is the best way to do this. It makes seating the teeth in the denture much easier. So I'm going to angle this at about a 45-degree angle. I'm going to go over to my support tab, and I'm going to click Generate Supports. I now have the denture supported, and this should be able to print. We don't have any more errors on this denture, only on this one. Now, in order to do the raft, we have to bring in a separate file. This is something that's relatively new, and so we haven't gotten it added to the software yet. So I'm going to go into my files, and I'm going to browse for my raft file. Here's my raft right here. I'm going to open it up and pull it in. Now, as you saw in the lecture series, it's a little flat plane that has a series of balls on top of it. The goal here is to connect this denture to this raft so that it prints as one piece, but limits the amount of adjustments I have to do versus using all these supports. So I'm going to position my raft over here in the middle, and I'm going to try to position this denture with this part of the flange attached to the raft. like so. So now you can see these balls are actually touching the denture. So there's actually overlap of where the denture meets the raft. Now the one negative to doing this is the way the system's set up is it's still going to give you this insufficient base because it doesn't realize that that's connected to those rafts. But as long as you're in these balls like this, you're going to be okay. The goal again is to maximize the surface area between the denture and the raft. But as you can see, the post-processing of this versus this is going to be a lot less because we don't have to take all these supports off and polish all these different supports. This will probably make, again, a little more sense when Andrea goes over the post-processing of these two different dentures. At this point, even with the high chance of print failure, we'd go ahead and send it to the printer. Now, let's go ahead and go back and show you what it would look like to print the teeth. I'm going to delete these three off. I'm now going to go ahead and add my teeth. And I'm going to show you the difference. Oh, that was the whole thing. Let's do lower teeth. As you can see, now we get the teeth brought in as one whole arch. And then for the upper, I'm going to bring it in quadrant so you can see what that looks like. There's our upper anterior. Here's our upper lower left posterior. And here is our upper right posterior. At this point, again, we all have the errors. And what I found with denture teeth, the best way to do this is to print them on the incisal edges. So I turn the teeth over just like this, highlight it, generate supports. Now we have no more errors. We're going to go to our upper teeth, rotate them to the incisal edge, generate supports. Again, rotate to incisal edge, generate supports, and rotate again and generate supports. Now I can position these wherever I want. And again, we have no chance of print failure. We have the printable, which is great. We would then be able to go and print these. You can see it's 1 hour and 2 minutes for the 50 microns. If we go up and change this to the 100, which is recommended, it goes down to 33 minutes. So a significant shorter time to print those. Now the final way to print dentures is to print them as one piece. What I'll tell you is that the printing process of this is really not that different. You're going to go in there and add the whole lower. You're going to add the whole upper. And at this point, we have the option to either add supports or a raft again. For the lower this time, I'm going to add a raft. There's my raft. We'll bring that in. Let's spin this around, position it on the raft like so. And then for the upper, I'm going to put some supports on the incisal edges. Like so. Again, you can see why I like utilizing the raft, because now all the post-processing that I need to do here is smoothing this up, versus over here I have a number of supports that I'm going to have to remove. You can position this different ways. You could do it like this to try and minimize your supports. Again, it just adds a lot of supports. I don't love that. So I've really got to the point with night guards and with dentures, I'm primarily printing with the rafts. At this point, we would then queue up our print just like everything else. And that concludes the 3D printing print section for the dentures.
Okay, so this is the post-processing for the denture models in resin. So far we have already printed and then we've washed them, and now they've gone in the curing unit first. So there's a couple different ways that you can make dentures in the 3D printing world. One of which is that you can print separate pieces. These are the denture bases, and then you can print the teeth separately, obviously in different resins. They come with different colors of the base and also different colors of the teeth too. So you can choose which ones work best for your office. You can print them separated, where they have the posterior teeth and then the anterior teeth, you can see, or you can print a full arch. And then what you do from this point, which I'll show you, is kind of connect them together, and then we'll use the resin to make them fit together. Okay, so we're going to start with the full arch here, and basically the processing is the same if you use the separated teeth or the arch. You'll find which works best for you. I have some of the base resin in just a little syringe here with a small tip. And you just put a small amount, just kind of on every tooth, or every area for each tooth. Can you see that? And these resins are light curable, so I have my curing light here for that. And they kind of just fit together like a puzzle once you get it in there good. So I like to hold them down pretty well and tack each side. And at this point, you shouldn't have put enough resin in there for it to kind of like squeeze out really. This is just enough to tack it, and then we'll go back in to put some more. And I've left the supports on here just so that it is a little easier to hold on to. You'll find your own workflow, but that seems to work for me here. So you can kind of see some little spaces once it's already in place. So this is when I'll go back in with the resin and kind of fill in those areas. In this part, I kind of just do a couple teeth at a time, just to, because the resin's pretty flowable, so you want to make sure that it's in the right spot. If you have larger spaces, you might need to do a couple different layers, just because, like I said, it's pretty flowable. So don't try to pack it all in at once, because usually it'll kind of squeeze out the other end. So just kind of do it in layers if you have larger spaces. So now I'm going to flip over to the back side and kind of do the same thing, filling in any spaces that are opened. Okay, so this is kind of pretty much all, combined together. There's a couple deeper spaces, but I'm going to leave those for now and go ahead and remove the supports. And then once we go back in to characterize it, if you choose to do that, you can kind of add some more at that time. So I'll kind of retouch base on that in just a minute. So we've used a raft on this denture base. We find that it's a lot easier instead of putting supports on the bottom side, just because it kind of keeps this area a lot cleaner, and it allows for you to remove less supports so that you have less smoothing to do on the back end. Okay, so now that all the supports have been removed, you can still kind of feel little notches on the back end that will probably annoy the patient. So we'll smooth those off in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and take this raft off too. So what I've done is I've kind of clipped off the rest of the raft. You can see on this other one. And then it still has like a flat edge and it's kind of rough. So I'm just going to use just a regular acrylic burr to kind of smooth that edge there. Depending on where you put your raft, you want to just make sure that you're not taking down any of, the areas that are important for the denture to stay in place. A lot of times we use these for temporary dentures, so we're going to be relining it anyways, but you still just want to make sure to keep the shape of that if possible. So just be really careful when you're taking that down. So now that we've smoothed the raft off of the denture base, the teeth are in place. There are still some notches on the back side of the teeth where the supports were, so I'm going to smooth those as well. You really want to try not to kind of mess up the anatomy of the teeth, just remove the supports kind of gently, because obviously once you get them in the mouth, you'll check the patient's bite, but you don't want to mess up, the actual design of this denture, so just be really careful. Okay, so overall that's pretty smooth. I'm just going to kind of dry it off really well. Okay, so next we're going to work on either polishing or glazing. This can be personal preference. It's completely up to you what you decide to do, but I'm going to go over both options here. So you can glaze the denture resin with denture resin if you'd like. It kind of seems to be the most cost efficient way because you already have it. If you want to go the glazing route, we also have OptiGlaze, which is another option as well. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this pink resin in the dish here. And grab a little paintbrush. So the denture base resin is actually pretty translucent, so you can paint it on the teeth as well and it won't necessarily show up pink unless you're putting several layers on. So I'm just going to kind of take just a little bit, and you want to do just a little bit at a time, just because, like I said earlier, although it's a thinner layer, still want to make sure that it's not pooling in any areas that it shouldn't be. So you'll see as it starts to pool in between the teeth, it does kind of turn a little pink, so we want to make sure that it looks as natural as possible. So I'm going to get another little brush and kind of a clean brush to get out the excess. So you'll kind of feel that it is a little bit sticky, or sometimes it might get, back on your hands, but it shouldn't be as tacky as before it goes in the curing unit in general. But you can kind of see where it's pretty, you know, pretty glazed there. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that there's half of that is finished, and then the other half is just still the unfinished, but you can kind of see the difference. And then here's the front side, and then going around to the unfinished side. So next I'm going to kind of show what it looks like to polish this with some polishing wheels. So to start with the polishing of this part, we're going to use a couple different burrs that we'll definitely give you the information of at the end of this video. But this one is just a gray wheel. It's kind of a softer, more rubbery style wheel, and it kind of just gets everything really smooth. And I just usually do like little small circle motions. You don't want to press too hard. You want to make sure you're kind of pressing pretty light, just so that the burr can get kind of a little too hot on the resin, and we don't want that. Okay, so I've gone over it with the first burr, and you can kind of see that it's starting to get a little bit shiny. It's not quite finished, but it's getting there. So now I'm just going to use this white wheel. It's not quite a cotton wheel. It is a little bit more firm. Okay, so you can kind of see the difference a little bit, obviously, in the glazed side and then the polished side. It's a personal preference. Some people might think that this is a little more natural looking, whereas this feels a little more smooth. So you'll kind of figure out which works best for you. But here are the two, those are the two options as far as that goes. Okay, the next way that you can print dentures in office is to print the entire denture with the teeth in place in the denture teeth resin. So I've used A1. It kind of simplifies things just so that you don't have to switch the resins in the tanks. If you're trying to do this quick, you know, you can just print one piece. Some people prefer it over this other option. So you'll find your way. But I'm going to go ahead and remove the rafts just like we did in the other with the other denture. And because we didn't use supports on this, we just used the raft. We don't have any need to smooth anything on the back end. So that's pretty much it for smoothing off, you know, the supports on this part. So now let's get to painting. So like we used to glaze this one, we're going to use the denture base resin to polish, or to paint, excuse me, the gum part of this. So I said before that it was pretty translucent so that it doesn't you know, make the teeth look pink. So we're going to add a little bit of color to this glaze to make it a little more pink. And then of course we'll do a couple of different layers just to, you know, get to the color you want. So I kind of just start at the top, and I almost will scrape some of it off. So you can kind of see how it's pretty liquidy. So you want to just make sure that it doesn't flow into the teeth. And you can kind of hold it to where gravity kind of helps you out here. So I'm not really getting super close to the teeth quite yet. I'm just kind of doing the bulk of the denture part, because once I get closer to the teeth, I'll use a smaller brush. So as you can see, I've gone layer by layer to try and achieve, you know, a pink color here. So you can keep continuing to add layers to get to the desired color. Obviously, is a little more of a tedious process, but it does, you know, it just depends on your preference on what you'd like to do. And that is that. And then you want to make sure it's a preference, obviously, depending on how long this patient will be in the denture. A lot of times I do like to make sure to paint the palate a little bit, just because, you know, if they're laughing or have their mouth open or people can see, this is kind of, you know, an eyesore. So I would definitely suggest painting the palate. And, you know, that's pretty much it there.